Albert Einstein is arguably the greatest physicist of all time, but a very few people know Einstein as a political thinker, especially his controversial views on Israel, Palestine, and the Arab-Israeli war. Therefore, this video breaks down exactly where he stood, taking help from actual letters and speeches of Einstein throughout his life. By the way, all the sources, including Einstein's actual letters and speeches, are linked in the description, so feel free to check them out yourself. There is no denying that Einstein was a Zionist. Before World War II, he supported a Jewish cultural center in Palestine rather than a militarized state. In his speech named Our Debt to Zionism, he praised Zionism, giving it credit for awakening a sense of Jewish solidarity and community, especially within the rising anti-Semitism within the era. But here, he also shows deep critique of a Jewish nationalist state forming within Palestine. I should much rather see a reasonable agreement with the Arabs on the basis of living together in peace rather than creation of a Jewish state with borders, an army, and a measure of temporal power. To understand this cultural Zionism of Einstein further, we have to look at his letter to Chaim Tchernowitz, a rabbi colleague. I have always been a supporter of an honest understanding policy with the Arabs that strives to solve the problem, preferably without English leadership. It is therefore clear that I agree with Mr. Magnus in regard to this matter, and that I have generally looked upon the Zionist politics with great uneasiness. Here, Mr. Magnus is a rabbi pacifist who dedicated himself to Jewish-Arab cooperation and reconciliation. The interesting thing Einstein further mentions in this letter is of Mr. Magnus's trials, which on further research, I found that in 1942, Magnus had founded a small political party called Union to promote a binational Palestine. But this proposition was so odious to the Zionist leadership and public opinion, however, that Magnus was soon condemned and even threatened to death by extremists. Anyways, back to Einstein. The similar sentiment is further seen after World War II. In his testimony to the Anglo-American Committee, 1946, Einstein says that resettlement should be guided by human need, not politics. This was of course in the context of whether to permit mass immigration of Holocaust survivors to Palestine. Again, he draws a sharp distinction between cultural Zionism and political Zionism. Quote, I was never in favor of a state. The state idea is not according to my heart. I cannot understand why it is needed. It is connected with many difficulties and narrow-mindedness. I believe it is bad. When asked about Arab resentment, he confidently states that the conflict is clearly political and blames the British for stoking enmity between the Jews and the Arabs. This opinion is especially interesting because this was moments before the formation of a formal Israel. And well, we all know what happened after Israel. On April 9, 1948, the Palestinian village of Deir Yassin was attacked by Zionist paramilitary groups. This occurred despite the village having signed a non-aggression pact with the nearby Jewish communities. When a real and final catastrophe should befall us in Palestine, the first responsible for it would be the British, and the second responsible for it, the terrorist organizations built up from our own ranks. This is Einstein's infamous letter to Shepard Rifkin, which he sent a day after the massacre, and catastrophe did befall. From November 1947 to mid-1949, injustice did befall on Palestinians. Einstein, in his co-signed letter to the New York Times, condemned the newly created Freedom Party of Israel. I will let Einstein explain the situation best. Amongst the most disturbing political phenomena of our time is the emergence of the Freedom Party, a political party closely akin to its organization, methods, political philosophy, and social appeal to the Nazi and fascist parties. It was formed out of the following of the former Irgun Zevai Leumi, a terrorist right-wing chauvinist organization in Palestine. Before irreparable damage is done, the American public must be informed as to the record and objectives of Mr. Begin and his movement. Today they speak of freedom, democracy, and anti-imperialism, whereas until recently they openly preached the doctrine of a fascist state. It is in its actions that the terrorist party betrays its real character. From its past actions, we can judge what it may be expected to do in the future. A shocking example was their behavior in the Arab village of Deir Yassin. On April 9th, terrorist bands attacked this peaceful village, which was not a military objective in the fighting, killed most of its inhabitants, 240 men, women, and children, and kept a few of them alive to parade as captives through the streets of Jerusalem. In the following years, Palestinians would be put through a great ordeal, which would later be called the Nakba, where around 600 to 750,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled from their own land. Later in 1952, Einstein was offered the presidency of Israel after the death of the first Israeli president. Einstein declined on 18 November 1952, explaining in his reply that he lacked the natural aptitude and experience for political office, and that he preferred to continue his work in science and humanist causes. Throughout the timeline of World War II and the Israeli-Arab War, Einstein's stance seems ever so timeless and interesting to me. Zionism is defined as a nationalist movement to establish and support a Jewish homeland through the colonization of Palestine. And yet, Einstein completely rejects the nationalist part. Through this whole chronology, Einstein states multiple times that he is in no shape or form support of a militarized and nationalized Jewish state, and at the same time wanted a Jewish homeland in Palestine based on correlation, cooperation, and harmony. Later, after the creation of a nationalized Israel, violence followed in Deir Yassin at April April 1984. And in this violence, Einstein stood for what was right. Instead of taking the route of a Zionist, he condemned Jewish terror groups, refusing to associate with them, even till the end, where he refused the presidency of Israel. Einstein's views were ever so interesting to me, because his opinions were so ambitious. I wouldn't say that they were contradictory, but they were paradoxical. He was a Zionist while rejecting nationalism and militarism. He was a realist, while at the same time he believed there would be total harmony between Jews and Arabs. And in this paradox, he always carried a kind of moral authority. Even though it feels naive in hindsight, Einstein's humanist stance is something which will always fascinate me. He believed Jews needed safety, dignity, and cultural renewal after the Holocaust. He believed Arabs had equal rights to the land and sympathized with them. He supported Israel as a refuge and cultural home, but warned against nationalism, militarism, and fascist tendencies, because he feared that if Jews imposed their will by force, it would create endless conflict and moral corruption of the Jewish cause. And Albert Einstein could not have been more correct.